If you enjoyed this episode, you're over 40, and you're looking for a free kettlebell workout to help you get started, check the first link in the description. It works on YouTube as well as on Spotify. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We have another episode of the Powerful Kettle Nights podcast, and today I have with me Sven Rieger from Germany. Now, it's funny, right? So we're going to have a conversation in English, but we both speak German. But we want everybody to understand what we're going to talk about. So Sven is a Strong First team leader from Germany. So we have Hardstyle in the house. So I'm highly interested in the philosophy. So as you all know, I talk to everybody from all spectrums, from all around the world when it comes to kettlebells. I don't have a philosophy. The only thing that I want to learn. But I also have a couple of questions which I'm going to ask Sven once we move a little bit forward in the podcast. But first of all, Sven, welcome and thank you so much for joining.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, Gregory. Funny enough, when you sent me the invitation, I was actually in Switzerland for a small vacation. Yeah.
Really? For a cert? Awesome.
In Dissenhofen?
Yeah, that's Zurich, close to Zurich, right?
It's basically just right across the German border.
Awesome.
But that's where I got your invitation.
No, that's awesome. Next time you're in Switzerland, you gotta hit me up. You gotta let me know.
I will do that.
Yes, please do it. Awesome. What was the cert for? Was it just a SFG1 and then you had folks come in?
Oh, you mean in Switzerland?
Yes.
No, vacation.
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 I misunderstood. I understood.
Summer vacation this year.
Okay. That would have been awesome, right on the certification in Diessenhofen, right?
Oh, that would probably be a little too awesome. Small, but
yes,
be a
probably,
beautiful scenery.
Yeah, it is most definitely.
I don't think that there is a gym at all, to be honest.
Yes, I was thinking like, okay, where did you certify people? Up in the mountains or what?
I think I didn't see anything that would look like a gym.
Okay, awesome. So every time we have a guest on the podcast, we always do the same thing, and that is we want to know your background, your story. How did you get started with kettlebells? Where are you now? And why even Strong First and all this? So please give us your background.
I'm going to quote Brad Jones, long story, somewhat kept medium, because I think it will take me a little longer.
Take your time.
Well, originally, I didn't really know what to do after school, to be honest. And since I was interested in training at that time, I did different internships. One with a physiotherapist, one at the gym. And the gym offered me to start working there and at the same time study as well. So to see both sides actually, at the academia side and the practical side on the in the same time frame. So that was actually quite interesting because it was also something fairly new in Germany at that time. And
how long was that ago?
That was 2011. So 12 years ago. Yeah.
So combining the sides of academia with the practice,
you
right?
were studying at the same time as you were working at the gym.
Great idea.
And the interesting thing was, at the gym I was working at, there was a practice with physiotherapy as well. So you were working actually fairly close with the therapists, either training patients of them in combination as they were going to treatments, and or you would take them after the therapy was over and start to integrate them back into the training process. And it was a fairly, let's say, standard fitness club in Germany. So mostly machines, a little free weight area, but the owner was pretty much more interested in getting, well, the people in training with the machines, because I mean, honestly, it's just less effort on the side of the gym.
Of course it is, yeah. From the economical perspective,
exactly.
it is the reason why these health and fitness clubs even got started, because it's so easy. You have a couple of machines, and you shovel a couple of people through. You have some instructors and coaches who, let's be honest, don't need a lot of knowledge. You just instruct them on the machine, and there you go. Yeah, most definitely.
And I mean, for average people, let's say, who didn't do much before, that can be all they need. I mean, they targeted people, well, their ideal group was 50 and above. So that was something he did fairly successfully because he was also a very good therapist. But at the same time, I was training with my best friend, who is a fantastic martial arts instructor, actually. And he got me in contact with the kettlebell at that time.
That's 2011, right?
That was 2011, right?
Wow.
So I was starting with another friend and two kettlebells in the basement of my parents' place. We had entered the kettlebell and pretty much didn't really know what we were doing until we started visiting some workshops at that time, smaller ones, and it was just something that was never actually mentioned during the studies. So although we did a lot of exercise physiology and all that stuff you need for the gym, you didn't really cover any of the let's say functional training side at that time. It just wasn't part of the curriculum, and that always had a certain fascination on me until today. I cannot really tell you why I started training with the kettlebell. I just saw it. I just saw what people did with it, and it had a certain pull on me. It's like the scene in Star Wars, right, where they were flying towards the Death Star, and at one point they were realizing, okay, that's actually not a moon, but they're going into the trap, but you were actually trapped. So here I am now.
And you know what's funny? It's rarely anybody who I've had on a podcast can explain what it was about the kettlebell on why they got started. Even the martial artists, I've had a lot of martial artists on, and I've asked them, I said, hey, why kettlebells? And they can't explain it. It's something, I don't know. I started training with it. It felt awesome.
Yeah.
That's it. You can't pinpoint it.
No, that's the explanation I give people. It just feels awesome. It gives you a feeling.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to delve into that a little deeper later on. It's just something that you cannot compare it to anything else, I think. So that never got out of my mind. I finished studying in 2014, moved to Stuttgart, did some other trainer certifications, lost a little side of the whole kettlebell thing, but never stopped completely training with it. Got more into barbell training. And then for whatever reason, the little voice in the back of your head was like, actually, I think you should do more with kettlebells again. And it was right around probably mid 2015, because at the end of 2015, I signed up for the SFG level 1. So the Strong First level 1 certification. Did that in August of 2016. And before that, actually, went to Italy in May of 2016, because there was Plant Strong, a special event with Pavel. And it was just one of the things I could have not missed.
Yeah.
So even I was not in the financial position at that time to actually have enough money for the seminar and for the travel and everything.
Yeah.
As it always is the case with such occasions, things magically align, because a friend of mine who trained me for the SFG1, at that time the only SFG2 instructor in Germany, based in Stuttgart. I mean, what can you say? He comes from Italy, and he was visiting his parents right on the same weekend, and he was like, you know what? Actually, I can drive you.
That fits perfectly.
Yes. So awesome. And there I met Fabio Zonin. Master instructor, country leader for Italy. Now a very good and close friend, who basically moved me, guided
up the
me
ladder,
in the right positions, who trusted me, who put a lot of trust in me from the very beginning. And then in Budapest at that time, in Hungary, where I did the level 1, I met the former CEO, Eric Frohard, and I got talking to him about plans for Strong First in Germany and stuff like that. And it was always like, you know what, if you need any help setting that up, I'd be more than happy to support you. I'm just not the guy who will be doing this, because I mean that was 2 years after I finished studying, so I basically had no network, no connections, didn't know anything about doing something like this.
And what kind of study was this?
Healthcare management.
Oh, okay.
So
The business side of things.
Not the business side of a little bit.
Okay.
It sounds fancy with the management in the title, but it's actually more like doing healthcare interventions in the public area, for example, or going into companies, optimizing the workplace so people don't develop health issues. But they also covered the whole exercise and training side of things, more or less. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Like they all do, yeah.
Yes. No, but with those two events, it's just one of those things. Right place, right time, right people.
Yes.
They saw something in me. I don't know what. I don't know what until this day. Fabio still says, yeah, I have big plans for you. I have no idea what he always talks about, but then some things happen and I'm like, how could you plan something like this? But yeah, it's one of those things that really, I would say, shaped me. I always had teachers, mentors, people like him who saw something in me I didn't see at that time, some I don't know, potential or how you want to call it, and at the same time had a vision of what they want to create and how you fit actually into that bigger picture. It's like, I think it's from Mike Boyle, who says you can offer education to anyone, but you cannot basically build the character of a person. That is something you cannot do through education. It's something
most definitely
the person has more or less to do on themselves. It's
exactly. No education.
That takes years, decades, and
most definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I owe a lot to those people, and again, Fabio was. I tried to pay him back basically, and he was like, "No, you know what? Don't pay me back. Pay it forward." And this is also the whole thing. I mean, I'm going a little bit off tracks here, but the whole physical culture thing. If you listen to Brooks Kubik, for example, or if you watch the Rogue documentaries of the old-time strongmen, like that line, that continuity of the process of giving things forward, so
most definitely
the people who come after you will actually benefit from that.
Yes.
That idea of a lineage. I mean, you talked about martial artists. Like I said, my best friend, he's a full instructor under Guru Dan Inosanto, Bruce Lee's best friend and student, and they also have that lineage, and you can track that back to the originator of something. And it's just beautiful to be part of something enormous this. It's just it gives me goosebumps just talking about it.
100%. I love that you mentioned the strongman world, where I did a little bit of research. Well, not me only. A friend of mine, Geronimo Milo, I would call him the godfather of kettlebells of Argentina. He did this research on kettlebell history, and he shared this research with me, and then I took a deep dive, and I shared this in the last podcast that I had, that I then bought the book from Edmond Debonet. It's called The Kings of Strength, which I'm reading now, where he talks about, he goes into the ancient times, where you, for example, have the Albanian strongman. Oh, I forgot his name. Every time I talk about it, I forget these names because it's so many. But then he mentions these strongmen, and then it moves up to the modern times, which was back in the days, was 19th century. And then this is where you find, for example, Felice Napoli was one of the original strongmen, also from Italy, and probably one of the first guys who was using clubs and bells from a certain extent. Then you have Hans Steirer from Munich, who was using ring weights, what they were called back then, kettlebells. And then from Felice Napoli, you have the one and only Eugene Sandow, right? who took it to the bodybuilding world then. And this is how everything spreads. I mean, I call myself, my sensei is Steve Cotter, right? So in my case, I'm taking these ideas that I have received from Steve, building on them, and then again, paying it forward as much as I can. And this is how we then move not only the fascination, but also to a certain extent the science of kettlebells into the next realm.
Yeah.
Because as you know, it is such a sad predicament to see that kettlebells are very rarely represented in the scientific realm. And if they are, most of the time they weren't used like let's say like a true practitioner would use them.
Yeah.
So there's still so much work to do when it comes to kettlebells. So I diverted a little bit, but
it's funny that you mentioned this, because we have actually right now going on a study with the police force here in Baden-Württemberg, which is the state I'm living in Germany. But the way the study had to be structured, actually, it doesn't allow you to, let's say, bring to fruition the potential the kettlebell could actually bring.
Why?
I'm not sure. A friend of mine, he's with the police. He does the study, and he said that it needed to be done before Christmas.
Okay.
Not sure. He does it as part of his bachelor program. But then again, I was like, why didn't they plan accordingly to allow you to do the study, let's say, properly? Because in the end, you will not have results that actually are representable.
Exactly.
So, I mean, there will be a critical discussion, as it always is at the end of the paper, but still, I mean.
And then they always say the same thing. Yeah. They always say, it needs more study. Exactly. No, really, it does, yes. And sometimes I'm asking myself, well, this is normal that everybody says this, but at the same time, if you would properly conduct, well, I'm not a scientist, let's put it like this, but if you really properly conduct a solid study with enough input from practitioners, because I think this is where, from my, let's say like from my bird's eye perspective, not knowing a lot about science or how scientists do their science work or their trials, is you need the experience. So yes, you are the guy who's putting together the data, the parameters, all the basics that you need to do a solid scientific study, but then you need the experience from outside, from the folks who are actually using this thing.
From the practitioners.
Exactly, and that's when you can get true scientific results, and not just, hey, okay, let's do a study about kettlebell swings or whatever have you, and then you just use somebody who, I don't know, who's using the kettlebell just sometimes, not really engaging the proper muscles, not really using or moving in a habitual manner where you don't have to think, you can focus on heavier weights, you can go all in because you don't have to think about technique. Why don't you put these folks or these guys in and then properly conduct it? That's sad. That would have been another chance with the police thing.
Yeah, I think to some degree it's probably an issue of, let's say, risk. Because if you put a, let's say, high level group of athletes on a program for 8 or 12 weeks that might not deliver any result, I'm not sure, but I think coaches might not be willing to offer their athletes for a reason like this. I mean,
but even let's use the police. It's such a great example. These guys, I mean, they are, let's call it like this, they are in our duty, right? So the taxpayers' money. So now you have a study that's conducted with the police force. Why not then, hey, you already have the participants, right? Yeah. And then use some solid program. And of course, don't use a program that destroys people. Of course not. But then maybe you can, I mean, are you familiar with it's such a fascinating study, the kettlebell trial. He calls it the bell trial.
No,
and it was done.
Actually.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great trial from Neil May is his name. He's a physiotherapist from Australia. And he did this trial, the bell trial, and he found out a couple of things. So the idea was, as far as I remember it and I recall it, he was working with a group of 59 to 79-year-olds, and he was conducting a study over, I think it was 6 weeks, where they had some intense kettlebell training, and then the results were how did they feel and how did they manage to go along and blah, blah, blah. So it was an awesome study. I think that's only part of it because it was a big one. And I had the podcast with him. He had when he talks about it, he's way more elaborate because it's his thing. And by the way, he found out one thing in that study, which I find interesting. So here's the thing, and that's why I think we need science. When it comes to the kettlebell discussion or debates that we have, the only thing that we can rely on is anecdotal evidence, right? So somebody says, or let's say like 100 people say, well, it made me stronger, it made me faster, it made me blah, 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 right? But it's sometimes hard to pinpoint it if you don't have raw data, like a scientific trial would offer. So here's what he did. He asked me, he said, what do you think? Oh no, let me ask you. It was a great question. He said, what do you think? How much ground reaction force, forward force, is involved when he does a hardstyle swing with a 16 kg? What do you think, percentage-wise? Forward force compared to vertical force.
Without seeing the person do the swing?
He was doing it. He's an RKC, and
Okay.
he has a solid swing. Yeah. He was swinging an 8, a 16, a 52 and something. He was swinging heavyweights as well.
Good question, to be honest. Never thought about that.
Because here's the thing. On our channel, so many people always comment about keep the arm straight, right, locked, when the kettlebell swings, because you are projecting the kettlebell forward, right? So it goes, you're slamming, you're hip hinging, boom. Now the kettlebell flies and it flies forward, right? So he studied this, and he asked me, he said, what do you think? I said, well, based upon what so many people say, I would assume that there's a lot of forward force involved, especially the heavier the weight gets. And he said, well, here's the thing. Forward force with an 8 kg and 16 kg, I can't remember the exact numbers, but he said it's something like 20%. I said, okay, so the rest is vertical force. So the bell wants to travel upwards. He said, yes. So I said, okay, what's the numbers with a 50 kg? He says, well, it's even lower. And it's funny because when you study the swing, right, especially the hardstyle swing, with a lot of tension and force, you are propelling the kettlebell from the backswing with all the propulsion power from your hips, from the glutes and the hamstrings, and the lower back, and of course your legs. So the kettlebell slams forward, so you would assume that the kettlebell goes forward. But it actually doesn't. It goes upward. And that's why sometimes when I have discussions with people online, and sometimes even with hardstyle folks, I say, it doesn't matter whether your arms are extended or whether they are a little bit bent. As long as I do understand the T-Rex, right? If you keep it like this, okay, then you're supposed to let the elbows go a little bit forward. But if we always have this discussion, keep the arms straight, well, it actually doesn't matter because the kettlebell wants to go upward. So if I keep the arms straight, I'm actually wasting energy because if I keep the elbows a little bit loose, the bell wants to go upwards, right?
Interesting thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, two things come to mind. The percentage in, let's say, vertical force direction makes sense because, I mean, you always have to accelerate a weight against gravity. So you have to oppose, let's say, a vertical force acting downward with the one that's acting upward.
Yes.
There was a video, and I'm not sure if you will find it online anymore because he's not on Instagram anymore. Tim Allman from Australia, one of our former senior instructors, he did a visual demonstration with sandbags because he liked actually throwing the implement to give you a sense of the force projection.
Yes.
So he would say either take a kettlebell outside or get a loadable sandbag. I had neither option until now, but he demonstrated it that depending on how you move the body, or depending on at what point you would go let go of the handle, it would actually be a forward or a pretty much upward
vertical force. Vertical force.
The path. The
trajectory.
Yes,
Exactly. Yeah.
And the visual demonstration was very, very great to see, because it was an aha moment in regards to differentiating the swing from the snatch. But I cannot tell you what weights he used. So you might find it on the Strong First Instagram page, because they reposted it. But I'm not sure what with the video happens once the original video
originator
so I'm not sure if that's there any longer. But that was great, and like you said, that would be something where we would need more good studies on.
Exactly. And that's why I love data, right? That's why let's put it like this, I don't like data that much, but when it comes to discussions that we have, this is when then data really, let's say, like, settles the debate, where you can say, listen, if it has been closely examined and reproduced, that's what science is for, right? It is to settle the question, or to answer the question, and to make it so that everybody that sits on the table can agree on something. Because, as you know, human beings don't agree a lot. But if we have a lot of data, we can say, okay, see? And an interesting thing that you mentioned about the forward projecting, that you leave the kettlebell and it starts flying. Here's the thing. One of my friends, he was a pretty, how can I say it? He was leading the police school of the eastern part of Switzerland, or he was the vice president. And he always went to the brutalities. So brutalities are events in Finland, I think, somewhere in Scandinavia, where you are running around with your AR-15, bam, 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 and really going in some kind of war zone. But it's I think it's timed and it goes to precision. So he's a gun guy, and he's a very cool guy. And then we actually did some work together with kettlebells and guns, because with this, we created a parkour where you have to do some swings, then you have to go lie down on the floor and shoot, because the idea was we want to create pressure. And now, how do you handle the gun under pressure after you lay down from a set of 10 swings with a 40 kg kettlebell? Right, you're sweating, you're breathing, and now you have to aim. It was a great project. We actually think about making it even bigger. What's such an awesome thing. So in the brutalities, here's one thing that he has to do. He has to swing the kettlebell and then let it go. And it has to fly as far forward as possible. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, the kettlebell does fly forward. Yes, of course. I think that makes sense, depending on when you release it, right? If you release it up here, it would rather fly upwards, most definitely. But nonetheless, it is interesting, this thought process, or this data that we have, that there's more vertical force involved in a swing than forward force or horizontal force. And that kind of like settles the debate to a certain extent about the arm extension. Because I was accused all the time of this. Everybody's telling me, well, you're T-Rexing it, blah, 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 right? So I'm saying, hey, listen, it doesn't matter what my arms are doing, because the focus, but you can correct me on this, or you can give me some additional input. The focus on a heavy kettlebell swing is in your legs. I want to have an explosive hip extension, and if my arms are extended or a little bit closer, doesn't matter. What do you say?
In regards to force production from the legs and hips, I don't think so, to be honest. What changes is, the farther the implement is away from the body, the more stability, the more stable it has to be in order to control the weight.
Yeah.
But
then if somebody,
if your main objective is, let's say, just the power production, then probably it doesn't make any real difference. With a heavy kettlebell, naturally my inclination would be just to keep the arms loose as a rope, just not to, let's say, waste any effort in keeping the arms bent. That would just be something I would naturally gravitate to.
Oh, now I gotta. That's gonna be a funny conversation now, because you're saying wasting. I don't want to waste effort. Coming from a Strong First guy, that sounds very interesting. So we got to talk about this a little bit, about the waste of effort. So let me. I want to get your thought process on this, because I talked to. I'm not sure if he was a team leader. And by the way, I have this question. I wrote it down before we jump into what I was trying to say. what is the work of a country team leader from Strong First? What is your
basically doing all the administrative side on things and organizing the events here in Germany. So I started with organizing at that time 1-day courses for kettlebell training, barbell training, bodyweight training. At one point, we moved into the workshop system that we have now. So a 101 workshop that basically sets the foundation, a 201 workshop for intermediate kind of people, and then a 301 workshop, which serves basically as the preparation to the certification with the given implement. And then we have a foundations workshop where we cover kettlebell, bodyweight, barbell, very basically, very fundamentally. And then at one point also organizing the certifications here in Germany. And this year, actually, that was one of my personal highlights ever, I want to say. We had Pavel actually in Germany for Strong Endurance here in Stuttgart. That was cool.
Strong Endurance.
Yep.
Man, we got to talk about endurance as well. Yeah. Okay, awesome. So let's go back to the snatch, the question that I was having. So let's talk about effort or wasting effort or energy. Give me a short rundown of the idea of the hardstyle snatch.
Not so much different than the swing. So it's that explosive, forceful impulse, but you want to direct the weight up instead of just letting the arm swing like a pendulum, like you would do in the swing, for example, right? Same but different, as we like to say.
Same but different. Yeah.
I mean, yes, you can use only a part of the weight you would be able to use for a heavy swing, but then you will have to cover a longer distance with the kettlebell, which means you need way more acceleration as with a swing.
Yeah.
Jeremy Layport, one of our master instructors, who has also a extensive background in Olympic weightlifting, he was like, the snatch is a exercise you have to be all in. Like a swing, there is no real height you have to hit. We have a range between sternum and chest height, but it's not a lockout, let's say, overhead like in the snatch. So you can swing a kettlebell somehow and get it moving, but for a snatch, you really need to be committed, and you need to be sure that you're able to produce enough force to move the weight overhead, especially if it gets heavy.
And from a let's call it, from a standpoint of, or from a perspective of basic human qualities of movement, right? Strength, endurance, speed, explosiveness. Where is the hardstyle snatch? What trains it the most? Which qualities are emphasized the most?
I would say all of them, but it has a higher barrier, let's say, because you need mobility. You need a stable lockout. You need to be able to do a lot of things at the same time, coordinating the whole movements. You need to be able to stay properly braced with the core. And I always make the joke at the level 1 certification when I teach the snatch. It's always like, how do you teach a beginner to snatch? And the obvious answer is you don't.
Exactly.
Because a beginner has no business of doing a snatch. Set the foundation, and actually somebody might never be able and might never have to do a snatch for what they want to achieve.
Not might, but I guarantee you this. I mean, we work with people all the time, and only a small percentage of, and we have normal people, right? Normal people, most age range from 40 plus, and you have to understand, we offer personal training with kettlebells, right? And so only a small percentage does the snatch, because it's not necessary.
Exactly.
If you have a solid swing, some solid presses, some solid squats, some farmer's walks, we have a prowler where you can push and pull weight. It's just the best thing that you can do, and doesn't require a lot of coordination and skill. However, of course, if you advance,
Yeah.
It's a fun exercise. And here's another thing. Where Stu McGill comes in with the kettlebell swing study. It's the only time, or not the only time, but this is where he can definitely pinpoint from a scientific perspective that the snatch trains all muscle groups. That's what he says in the study. All muscle groups. So it's one of the most bang for your buck exercises. But of course, it requires a lot of skill. But funny thing is, if you talk to, for example, hello Martin. If you talk to, for example, to a Dmitry Klokov, you know what he says? The master weightlifter? He says, don't do snatch. No barbell snatch. I just had this with a recent conversation from Gregor Sobochan, and Gregor Sobochan is a kettlebell sport world champion, a master of sport international class. Ciao Danilo, cheese. And he also has now he has a background in sports. He's coaching volleyball players, and he met Dmitry Klokov. And you would think, that's why I love talking to these people. You would think that Olympic exercises are awesome for normal people as well.
Oh.
Dmitry Klokov said, no snatch. You want to improve your sports guys? Squats and jumps.
Yeah.
No snatch. And so that's another, even though the snatch is such a powerful exercise, he says it's a technical exercise for what we have to do in weightlifting.
Exactly.
So we could almost say like, if you don't have no business in weightlifting, don't do the snatch with a barbell. Right? And we could maybe, the kettlebell is a little bit, it's more forgiving. It's not as, let's call it dangerous as a heavy snatch with a barbell, but it's still probably a little bit the same path to a certain extent. The snatch is awesome, but swing, squat, press, you're good.
It's the same thing with the barbell squat. Why would you ever have to do a barbell squat if you're not an Olympic weightlifter or powerlifter? There are so many great squat variations with kettlebells, with whatever implement, or completely different leg exercises that for general population would be all they need.
Mm-hmm. Especially
but you see those guys moving big weights in the squat, and it just looks impressive if they do it well. And then you're like, I want to do that as well. For me, right now my focus in the training is actually the snatch, single and double snatch. But I would not be able to tell you why. It's just that feeling.
Yeah, and you are capable of doing it.
I'm capable of doing it.
That's another thing, right?
I spent, let me see, 4 months, because I had a inflammation of my tendons on the backside of my wrist. I was not able to put even a 60-kilogram bell in the rack position because the pressure would just be too hurtful. And ironically, the smaller the bell, the higher it would sit, the worse the pain would be. I just did swings, 2-arm swings, goblet squats, and 1-arm push-ups. And I got super strong. Shortly after that, I was able to do my, up until now, personal record in the bench press without doing that many bench presses. So we like the complicated things for whatever reason, because it's just intriguing to us. It looks cool. But we lose sight of the simpler things that could work.
Yeah, the basics work most definitely.
It's like simple and sinister. When I was training for Sinister, I did 1.5 years, 5 times a week, swings and get-ups. And I was in one of, if not the best shapes of my life. It was just crazy. I had a foundation on which to build in any direction I wanted at that time. But the average weight I was using for the swing and the get-up at that time was 48 kgs. And I did 500 swings and 50 get-ups on average each week. That just leaves its mark.
That's massive volume.
And there's a sentence in Simple and Sinister I think people overread all the time. Pavel says, the true magic of the program will show itself once you're at the simple weight, which would be 32 kilograms for gentlemen in the swing and the get up, or 24 kilo in the swing and 16 kilo in the get up for ladies, and higher. Up until then, you're basically developing a skill. You're developing a foundation, fundamental capacity and whatnot. But the real change, the real input, let's say, for your body happens with the heavier weights.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the thing. People, it's so boring on the outside. There were some variations of the program now on the Strong First blog as well. Pavel Matzek put one out. That was the program I tested for him actually, and with which I reached sinister, let's say, effortless. So I was basically progressing 1.5 years without any plateau. There were just some hicks because of my impatience, let's say. But it's, why would you do something more complicated if something simple would actually do the job?
That's a good point, but I have to interject real quick. I think simple and sinister is cool. I think the swing and the get up are cool, but coming from the lens of working with normal people, I don't think it's a great workout for normal people. I think for normal people who never moved in their life, squats, press, farmer's carries, deadlifts, there you go. I think when you look back at the Turkish get-up, and as far as I know, I talked to John Duquesne, I talked to all these guys who were there back in the beginning. Steve Maxwell introduced the Turkish get-up. And the funny thing is the Turkish get-up is actually a circus act. If you go back to, what's his name? Charles Pata. The last time I mispronounced it. Charles Pata was, as far as we know, maybe it goes even back further. Charles Pata was one of the first strongmen who was on record doing this exercise for the circus, for the theater. And while it doesn't mean that a circus exercise cannot be good for your GPP, for just your general physical preparation, I think a squat and a press gives more value than a get-up. That's my perspective.
But look at the program again. There is a squat in there as well. It's just in the warm-up.
Okay.
So the warm-up would be halo to prepare the shoulder and the T-spine for the lockout in the get-up.
Yes.
You have the hip bridge, and you have the goblet squat. And we could argue that the get-up is something like a static press, or could lead you into the press at one point. It is something like a loaded carry. I like the get-up. I mean, if you look at what Gray Cook says about the get-up, and this is, I think, the beautiful thing about the exercise, it can fill so many needs depending on the person. So, yes,
I get that. I get that point.
There might be no reason for somebody to limit themselves on just swings and get-ups. It might not be appropriate for everybody, even depending on their mobility, depending on their history with
especially, you
injuries.
know, where I'm coming from is just the basic population. And I've talked to many coaches who echoed similar sentiments. They were like, a get-up, first of all, is a skill exercise, requires a lot of time to teach. And in our case, if you work as a personal trainer, you have people coming in who don't have, you have to, in our case, for example, we have 45 minutes of work. So you pay us for 45 minutes of a lesson. So it's not my job to teach you the exercise with so much skill, because you're coming here for the workout, you come here to train. So if you are a fan of kettlebells, like you and me are, and we're the crazy ones, of course we want to learn everything about the kettlebell, but normal people, for them, from my perspective, and I'm not the only guy saying this, it is the get up, while it is a cool exercise, it requires too much skill. If you have beginners coming in, doing just basic deadlifts and basic presses and basic squats, you're good. And you're mentioning the warm-up, which is a great addition, but a warm-up is still a warm-up, right? So it doesn't take you to that place where you would normally go if you would press and deadlift weights in a workout, so to speak, right? But I still get it.
Yeah, but of course, I mean, that is a big differentiation I think you have to make. It always depends on what the student or the person who comes to you wants to get out of the training.
Yes. But don't you
when I was
think
working at the gym, people came in just for general training. And they basically didn't really care what they were doing as long as they were feeling what they wanted to feel afterwards.
Exactly.
But I think it's kind of a
But don't you think, if I may
journey.
just, if most definitely, but don't you think, let's take us out of the game, right? The crazy folks. That's the sport guys, the weightlifting guys, the hard stuff. Let's take them all away, right? If we take these folks away from the general population, we're still left with 99% of people. Because you and me, we're the crazy ones, the guys who love it, and we train. If you give me a program, I'll give you a program, and we have a goal, we follow it. Or we're dedicated. We love it. But if you work as a coach, if you train normal people, 50 plus, most people never moved weights in their life. Like you say, they don't care about, I don't know. Even though it's kind of like our niche a little bit, we draw them in with, hey, you want to get in shape, blah, 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 blah. And then I talk about all the benefits of kettlebell training to get you. And we see this, right? Over 40s, over 50s, over 60s, they do awesome with kettlebells, right? The ballistics especially, they're awesome for the joints. They build muscle, they build stability. You don't hurt your joints. You have banged up knees, banged up hips, banged up feet. Doesn't matter. If you do some swings, you feel awesome. In most cases, right? But if we take us away, you're still left with a big part. You mentioned it depends on the person who walks in. 99% of the cases, normal people who walk in, they're banged up everywhere. And they don't have a good kinesthetic sense. And since we're short on time and most people don't want to train anyways, my job as a coach is to give them the most bang for the buck exercises in a short amount of time as quick as possible.
Which is why you should never limit yourself on just one tool.
Yeah, most definitely.
We are talking about the kettlebell because it's a kettlebell podcast. We love kettlebells. But I think this is something, a big mistake you could make as a coach in your career. Is just saying, oh, I'm the kettlebell guy. And I'm only teaching you kettlebells whether you want it or not. If you work at the gym, you have to work with whatever expectations people have that come to you. At least in the beginning.
But let me put it like this. We have people coming in and everybody gets down with the kettlebell. Everybody.
Yep.
Because it's, let's take even a step back. You're right. We also have barbells. I have a similar path like you. I was in the gym. I loved it. I loved machines as well. Every training modality is awesome. But I found that kettlebells give you, in a short amount of time, it covers endurance, strength, mobility. It's a lot of fun. You stand while you train. You don't sit down in most cases. And it just gives you this primal feeling, right? Barbells don't do this the same way like a kettlebell does it. You can't train. Let's put it like this. Most of the time, you don't really use a barbell for endurance. Kettlebells, you can. Yes, you can you can use dumbbells for endurance, but your forearm will die. So if you, for example, use a clean and press and jerk like we do it in a sport fashion, you can train indefinitely for 30 minutes. And there you have your cardio training. So I believe based upon the understanding the tools in question, of course we use barbells, of course we use dumbbells, and we have some clients who say, I don't click as well with the with the kettlebell. Hey, let's do some prowler, let's do some bench press. Of course, that's it. And I don't want to limit ourselves and say, hey, we only do this. But here's the thing: if you work in the fitness business with normal people, there's already thousands of personal trainers out there. So the way I differentiate myself is becoming an expert in the kettlebell sphere to a certain extent, where you draw people in and then give them the benefits of kettlebells. And since it's such an awesome tool and covers so many physical qualities all at once, I think it's hands down one of the best tools to train everybody with.
See, and this is the complete different experience we had on the business side of things, let's say, because I was working at the gym where it was the exact other way around. I had more or less, well, let's say in quotation mark, convinced people to train with kettlebells because they were like, oh no, I'm not going to train with that. And then they saw me training with the kettlebell in my free time when I was there. And they
you were allowed to train with kettlebells in your free time in this gym?
Yeah, so I came before work and trained.
Awesome.
And
I was forbidden. They told it was prohibited in my case.
Come on.
Don't do anything that is not in the career. Let me tell you, that's another story.
That's a different story. But I have made those same experiences as well. Believe me. Yeah, and at one point they started to come to the kettlebell classes, and the funny thing was they not only did they realize they could do more in less time with just a simple tool.
Exactly.
I had a lot of people actually starting like, you know what, I want to do simple and sinister. I don't think I need more. So it's people are different, needs are different, and I think you just in let's say in the fitness industry you have to be able to let's say surf the waves, because it will never be the same with two different persons, and you need to be able to adjust independent on your preferences. The more you get an expert in a certain field, the more people will reach out because of that to you, like they do with you and me. I'm sure that you get requests for, I want to learn XYZ with the kettlebell, I want to improve one specific skill with the kettlebell. I'm going to drive 2 hours to see you just to do that.
Exactly.
You will get those people, but that is something, let's say, you have to earn yourself.
Yeah, and it's a small percentage.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, and it's a small percentage of people, I think. It is, especially if you want to, let's say, if you want to make a business, and if you want to grow the business, that's at least I would say it like this, that's not the path to take if you are looking for, it may be, let's put it like, it could be, but let's put it like this, in the personal training realm, helping people get in shape who never moved anything in their life, especially above 40, 50, and 60. I draw them in with the idea of you want to get fit, you want to get in shape, you want to sleep better, you want all these beautiful qualities that come with training. And then if I get you there, I hook you there, then I'm going to share how powerful the kettlebell for this particular task is, right? But of course, you're going to have both, but most people just need to get in shape, have a long pain point, they have back pain since forever, they want to lose their belly fat. It is what it is, right? So then I think even in that regard, the kettlebell is such a great tool. And I think this is where Pavel found the way, to a certain extent, to divert away from the kettlebell sport idea, because kettlebell sport is too hardcore, it's too niche, and it does work a little bit for general fitness, but it's, again, such a skill-based practice that for most people it is not suitable. You know, a couple of months or maybe years ago, I would have said, let's put everybody on a clean and jerk and blah, 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 blah. It works. Yeah, it works, but it takes way too much time.
It goes back to what you said, Klokov mentions with the snatch, right?
Exactly.
Just because you want to train with the barbell doesn't mean you have to do barbell snatches.
Exactly. And when I heard this, that was just recently. When I heard this, that Dmitry Klokov is telling you don't do snatch with barbell, I'm like, what? Really? The king says this. All right, this settles the debate to a certain extent. So, okay, let's not do it then, for most people.
But so, it goes back to what are your goals. If you want to do the snatch because you want to do the snatch, or you're an Olympic weightlifter, then there is no other way around.
Exactly.
If you want to get, let's say, stronger in a general sense, well, there are probably exercises that will get you there faster. Some people might enjoy the technical path of learning a new skill. It might be something like a martial art for them. Then cool, why not? Invest in the program, invest in the process, and learn something. Because, I mean, we all know learning something new does so many good things for you.
I just wanted to say this. Yeah, I just wanted to share that.
And not just, I mean, it keeps you young, I want to say. It keeps you humble. I mentioned Guru Dan Inosanto, right? He's a living legend in the martial arts realm. He went, it might be 10 years actually right now. He went to the Machados, a very famous Brazilian jiu-jitsu family.
BJJ, I thought I heard this name.
And he was like, you know what? Give me your white belt. I want to learn. And he was almost 80, I think, at that point.
That's a sign of a master, man. That's
and I'm
what
like,
it is, man.
that man,
Exactly.
it's just fascinating. He did the same thing with, it's not Thai boxing, but it's something similar from an Asian country. And he had to adopt a few things because his joints would ache sometimes. So yeah, why not? But a master, seeks out other people to learn from
Exactly.
because he realizes that there's still so much he doesn't know.
I just, when I had the podcast with Gregor Sobochan last week, when we had the discussion, it was 2 hours and 10 minutes, something like this. So after the discussion, I told him, I said, you know what? It is another example of this realization that the more you learn, the less you know.
Yeah, exactly. There's just so much out there.
That's it.
And I mean, going back to the whole training and business thing, yes, you need to give people what they want, but sometimes people might not know what they need. So you have to lure them
exactly.
in and get them on that journey. And this is something.
That's what it is, man.
That's
what. Hey, a guy once said, he said, you know, when it comes to, for example, weight loss, right? We all know, eat a little bit less. That's easier said than done.
Yes, it is.
Move a little bit more, drink a little bit more water, cut away the sugary drinks, cut away the fast food as much as possible. Don't eliminate completely, but just dial it down a little bit. And then it's going to be a long journey, right? So this is the truth about weight loss. But that's not what people want. So they don't want to hear this. So I talked to a coach yesterday. I said, you know what? I'm on the same page, because I think he was, now he wasn't critiquing, but he was kind of like we were talking about context, right? And he said, well, like before we started the discussion, right? We talked about Stu McGill, about it depends.
Yeah.
So it's exactly the same thing. It is, in many cases, it is, yes, you don't like it, but it depends. I get it. But here's the thing. People want answers. If we only abide by the rule of it depends, we could write books and film videos with one sentence in it and one sentence spoken. Hey, that's your problem, right? It depends. Go seek me out. Regards. Right? So, like you said, you have to give people what they want, and then you give people what they need. And then somebody once said, I'll never forget this, he said, you know what, Gregory? You can either be right or you can be rich. And I was like, okay. I get where you're coming from. I get where you're coming from. So here's my, let's put it back to the snatch, because this is where I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. So you said endurance, right?
Strong endurance you talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about this then. Let's talk about this. But first, that's the second thing. Let's put a mark on it. That's what we're going to talk about, because there's so many things are crossing around, so I write things down. So when it comes to the snatch, here's the thing. We know it's a full body exercise. We know the skill. Let's put all these things aside. Just from the basis of what kind of human quality does it improve? The kettlebell snatch, right? Endurance, explosiveness, strength, right?
You name it.
You name it.
I think there is probably not a single quality it would not improve, depending on how you program it.
Okay, great. So here's my thing.
Would it be the best choice for everything? Probably not.
Probably not. No. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm with you on this.
That is, I think, the thing with the kettlebell in general. It's not a specialist, it's a generalist.
Yeah.
And when you want to specialize in a certain area, well, then you have to do the things that get you there.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying, and I wonder what you say. You want to become the strongest? Pick up barbells.
Yes.
You can still become hell of strong with heavy kettlebells, right? But from a measurement perspective, it is
the way we measure strength in, let's say, the human society. Then yes, you need a barbell.
Exactly.
If you talk about strength in a more general term, I mean, you had Brad on, and you know about his odyssey, let's say, with cancer treatment and everything else. That is a kind of strength that is something completely different. You can be squatting 1,000 pounds, but would you be able to go through something like that? That's not a guarantee. But you can build strength generally. And this is something I was so fascinated by how he laid that out. He was like, the physical training basically gave him the mental strength to go through this whole phase of his life. And the mental strength allowed him afterwards to get back into the training process and build that physical strength again. And that is just something.
So, sounds like a martial art. That you see, that's why martial art is so big fans of kettlebells, right?
I think if you look at let's say all big human endeavors, be it art, be it sport, whatever, the thought process behind, the principles behind are pretty much the same. I was talking with musicians who basically will give you the same exact answer as any good coach when it comes to practicing their given instrument. If you would just listen and not knowing what he was talking about, you could mistaking him for talking about training.
Yeah, he's a trainer.
It's so interesting.
Awesome.
And awesome. Always willing to learn. That is something I think differentiates the masters, the good people, the great ones from everybody else. But also being willing to suffer in the short term for the long-term payoff.
Exactly.
That is something Fabio told me. He got involved with Dietmar Wolf from Norway. He used to be the national powerlifting coach there, and he would when training the youth, he would actually pull them back when they progressed further than he anticipated, because he was like, the sooner they reach a peak, the sooner it goes down, or even they plateau there. Right? He was not interested in what they were capable of doing in 1 year or 2 years. He was like, what are they doing in 5, 6, 7 years from now? So you also have that longevity as
even though
concern. It's something that lacks a lot of systems, programs, approaches, I think.
But isn't it, in sports, right? In sports, longevity is not, let's put it like this. Healthy longevity is not really the goal. The idea is you want to peak, you want to perform, and then you taper off into something. As soon as you leave the sport or you get out of the sport, you taper off into something that's more designed to optimize your health. Because let's be honest, right? Sports performance, in most cases, is not a healthy endeavor. If you want to go into the peak realm, if you want to join the elites, it is always a matter of breaking down the health of your body in order to achieve levels that haven't been possible before, or to always move the goalpost. Right? Would you agree?
I'm starting to think that it might be only the case if you try to do that in the short term.
But don't you think that so many athletes they're banged up when they leave their sports? In so many cases, because they push their bodies to the ultimate max, which they have to.
I think they did that too soon. If you think about that early specialization that starts to happen all around the world. I mean, in Germany, it's soccer, right?
Yeah.
Kids start playing soccer at the age of what, 3, 4, and then don't do anything else. But you will start to develop certain, not just imbalances.
Most definitely, but aren't
injuries?
I agree wholeheartedly. But aren't you required, because the competitiveness is so high?
If you want to see the early success, then yes. If you're more in for the long run, then probably not. And soccer is a different sport, let's say, than powerlifting completely. When you look at the strength sports, I mean, let's say bone density, that takes way longer. There are people in powerlifting who are able to move hundreds of kilograms because they invested in a long-term process, which not also resulted in the muscular adaptations, but also the bone density, the ligaments, tendons are able to support that heavy load. The younger guys, yes, sure, muscles, hormones, they're in their prime, but if you want to just build in that longevity from the very beginning, I think having that bigger view on a career, let's say, is something that would pay off immensely.
From a sports performance, I would agree, but I would still say that at the end of the day, if you want to compete with the elite, you're bound to break down your body. And you hear this from so many areas of not only coaches, but also athletes and professionals who tell you, you want to reach that realm, it's going to be a process where you have to ultimately sacrifice your health to, I'm not saying everything, but to a certain extent. Even I would say with the best preparation. But that's again where we need some data and some more input. But I agree with, I see where you're coming from.
I can't remember the name of the guy. I think it was an English powerlifter. They did like a best of video of him over the years, and he was progressing through the weight categories along with the weight as well. And what it showed me to some degree was, sure, of course, to move the heavier weight, you need to have the appropriate body weight yourself just to support the weight.
Exactly.
But I think what made him so successful is exactly that long-term thinking. Like,
are you talking about Eddie Cohn?
No, it wasn't Cohn.
Because he said something similar.
Yep. But I know he has the similar kind of thinking.
Yeah, similar kind of thinking.
If you pay a little attention at that and, let's say, forego the early success, but keep focus on the training process, it will give you a higher peak overall. That doesn't mean you're not going to be successful in the beginning, but it will prevent, let's say, a certain stunt in
which I agree. Yes, if you peak too soon, you're probably going to burn out. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
And I mean, yes, it's cool if you have kids who are exceptional in their sport, even on a international level. But what might happen if we took just a slightly different approach over the long run? And what would they be able to do as adults?
Then I think in that regard, sports is not the proper, or just sports performance is then not the proper tool, because there we always have this competitiveness. Even though now that I mentioned Eddie Cohn, I love what he said. He said most people lift too heavy for too long.
Yeah, exactly. And
then they break down, right? So he rarely got hurt, which is awesome. But then look at the I love what Ed Cohn's saying, but we should then take a bird's eye perspective and then cut through, let's say, like thousands of successful powerlifters, and then see how many got hurt, how many have still issues, and how many have gone like, hey, I didn't hurt myself at all. I mean, look at what, I mean, that's probably also related to drug use, but listen to what Dorian Yates is saying, right? He says, stop with the bodybuilding thing. If you've reached a certain age, stop it and move into other realms, because it's way more important for your health.
Yep.
So I had to learn this. But he said, still, most of my peers and many of my friends, they're still stuck in the bodybuilding world, not realizing that it's a path to probably destruction to a certain extent, right? I'm not want to paint everything with a broad brush, but if you hear the master say it, right, he might have a point. And so the same goes to a certain extent, in my opinion, with all professional sports, because it still leads to a detriment in health. But I also get where you're coming from, where you say, listen, we can maybe mitigate this whole situation by, and that's where probably this Norwegian or Swede,
Norwegian.
The Norwegian, right? The Norwegian coach has a point where he says, hey, we don't want to go too fast, right? Especially with kids.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree.
I mean, you don't want to waste all the future talents.
Yeah, most definitely.
That's you hear that from different athletic areas. Let's say in Germany, I had similar conversations with friends and other coaches where they're really wasting the youth with the way they're pushing them.
Yeah.
And
listen to what the Russians say. They say there are no good coaches in the West. All of them say it. Sergei Rudnev says this. Valery Fedorenko says this. They're like, there's no good coaches in the West. No, that's the problem. I love how it's like, boom, that's what it is, man.
Well, that's the Russian mentality, right?
Yeah. And you're not built for this. You're not called from the same cloth, you know. I love these guys. They're so awesome. Hey, but let's put it back to a little bit to the snatch thing. Because here's the thing, and the reason why I'm asking you this. The way I do the snatch, or let's put it like this. The volume snatch, where the idea is to move as efficient as possible, to work for endurance. At the end of the day, especially if you talk all to these Russian guys and all these folks, the kettlebell snatch is an endurance exercise from their perspective. And I get where they're coming from because I see it the same. But you're saying, but of course, it also builds some strength to a certain extent, of course, because you're using a weight. Well, it's not just locomotion. You're not just running. You're not just skiing. Even though it would be, we could probably place it next to rowing to a certain extent. Rowing and snatching. So here's the thing. It does build strength, yes, to a certain extent, but I would classify it as an endurance exercise if you do it for the volume part, especially with the volume technique. And I wouldn't consider it an explosive exercise. And I wouldn't even consider, and I wonder what your take is, I wouldn't even consider the hardstyle swing as an explosive exercise, because if you look at what Yuri Verkhoshansky says and what Louis Simmons, the late Louis Simmons, rest in peace, from Westside Barbell is saying, you only are able to produce explosiveness if you go into the 1.5 seconds of contraction and relaxation of the muscle, which is lightning fast. And you can only achieve this with jumps. So when we consider that explosiveness, true explosiveness is built in this 1.5 seconds activation and deactivation of the muscle fibers, then neither is swing and neither is snatch is the proper tool to build explosiveness. But of course, if you haven't done anything like it before, you will build explosiveness. But from the true sense, I don't think it is. What do you think?
Probably. For, let's say, high-level athletes, yes. You need to be way more specific in the way you structure programs, select exercises. But like you said, for most people, for me, yeah, that's probably going to do the job.
Interesting.
I mean, it always comes back to the question, what do you want to get out of training and where are you currently?
Where are you? That's a good condition.
Because that changes everything.
That's a good condition. Which
if
I
you
think
ask me for a, let's say, program to increase your pull-ups, and you can do 5 pull-ups right now, then my answer will be different compared to when you come to me and say, I can do 15 pull-ups right now and I want to do more. It's a completely different starting point and you need a different approach.
That's a very good point.
And I mean, that's the thing with beginners, right? You can do basically anything with them and they will improve.
Yeah.
I think Mark Ripto in Starting Strength in the introduction makes the joke that you can take a beginner and put him on the stationary bike and his deadlift will increase.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, probably depending on the person, that could work.
Another thing,
only up to a certain point.
Exactly. Gregor Sobochan shared this similar sentiment because we were talking about the role of kettlebells. It's funny, when you look at sports, kettlebells don't play no roles in sports. It's no kettlebells at all. Look at the Russian material. It's everything barbells and jumps. Barbells and jumps and SPP exercises, highly specialized exercises. So kettlebells have no place there, at least from their perspective, right? And he says this too. Training volleyball, I think he trains the Croatian national volleyball team. No kettlebells, or maybe just some small basics, right? And even with the hockey guys, he says, yeah, maybe some swings. Because when he joined, they were like, oh, now we're going to do kettlebells and everything. He said, no. No kettlebells. Maybe just a little bit. Fascinating. From Gregor Sobochan. And he said, what did he say? Oh, I forgot. Why did I, what did you say before? What did I share about? See, that's when you have so many. Explosiveness, yes.
Depending on the
level where
the given person.
Oh, I almost got it, but it left me again. Yeah, depending on the level. See, when you have such an awesome conversations, you have so many thoughts in your mind. Then I want to listen to what you're saying. So sometimes these thoughts escape me. But nonetheless, it was with this conversation with Rieger was so awesome when we were talking about this specific idea, also of explosiveness and all these basics. And I love how you framed this. That's probably something that I'm missing to a certain extent. Yes, from the true sense of the word, let's put it like this: 0.15 seconds is true explosiveness. But if you use a beginner, or just even you don't even have to be a beginner. Now I realize what I wanted to say. Because I said, why do you think people talk about the kettlebell effect or the what the hell effect, where they say, hey, I started doing swings and my deadlift went up. And he said something so basic, so easy to. He said, well, I think it's because they took time away from the deadlift.
Interesting thought.
They were doing something else. And it resonated with me because when you look at the Russian literature, that's this one story where I don't know who shared it with me. I don't know if I got it from the books or if it was in a discussion. You had the Russian volleyball team competing against, I don't know what it was. So these guys show up and these gals show up. Or it was guys or gals, I don't know. But who cares? So they showed up. And the evening before they played the game, they were playing soccer. And they were playing soccer intensively, like balls to the walls. And the next day, they beat the other team. And then when they asked the coach, this is exactly the Russian philosophy, where like, you gotta take your time away from the implement or the tool that you're using, and you will get better at it because you're using your motor system, your nervous system, in a completely different manner, which then might augment your tool that you're specializing in. Such a fascinating thought.
Well, specifically to the deadlift, two things come to mind. So at the recent seminar Pavel was teaching in the States, Programming Demystified, he briefly went over the muscle fiber types. Muscle fiber types.
Muscle fiber types. Yes. It happens to me also sometimes.
And he was like, the default setting of the intermediate fibers is fast. And the more you do, the more they actually turn into slow.
So they can adapt? So
a
the muscle fibers
layoff
adapt? Yeah.
Actually increases the fast fiber percentages. It was something like about, we were talking about additional training days, because if you look at guys like Gallagher, they actually had people train once a week, like
in the weight room.
Yeah, super specialized.
Super specialized stuff. Most definitely.
For them, actually, the light training days would bring more cons than pros, because they would interfere with certain very specialized adaptations in regards to maximum strength. So one thing could be, I'm not sure, but just taking time off the deadlift might have an effect on that conversion as well. I'm not sure, because swings are, in regard to total weight, not as heavy as the deadlift. Even though we have the acting force in the hike pass of the backswing. I mean, Brett talked about this, the virtual force, the projecting force that you generate in the backswing with the kettlebell can still get very high, but it's a different kind of loading on the muscle. So that might actually change something in that. And then also, if you don't deadlift, I mean, a heavy deadlift, that's a very big stress you put on the body. So it takes a lot of recovery time. So maybe just that could facilitate.
Yeah.
So
fascinating, right? So it's a similar movement, yes, but maybe just because you took time off away from the exercise, that's why it went up. And see, that's why we have so many stories surrounding kettlebells. That's why I would love to have more data on it, where we can at least to a certain extent, pinpoint. See, that's probably the reason why. Because all what we're doing now is not all. I mean, I don't want to downplay it, because it's still important. It's experience and it's I think somebody once said, if you have enough anecdotal experience, that's actually scientific experience at the end. So, but it would be awesome to really pinpoint it, to be able to explain it a little bit in further detail, so we can come closer to the truth as to why this is. And the funny thing that you mentioned about Pavel's teachings, the first thing that came to mind, I read the book The Weightlifter from R.R. Roman, I think is his name. It's a Russian book. It was translated by Andrew Charniga, which I've also had on the podcast. He's an awesome weightlifting guy. And there they say, depending on the phase that you're in. So the Russians, they always say you have GPP phase, general physical preparation. Then you have SPP phase. Then you have competitive phase. And then you have post-competitive phase. So it's 4 phases. And depending on the phases that you are, especially I think in the SPP phase, you move away from the GPP stuff.
Yeah.
And you focus on the highly specialized exercises.
Of course.
And in the competitive phase, you move away from everything and want to get ready for the competitive surroundings where you move these heavier weights. And the competitive weights to a certain extent. And then in post-comp, this is so fascinating, this is when you taper off and then do something completely different.
Yeah.
You go away from your sport, right?
It's also a mental, psychological deload. Exactly. You're doing something completely different. Yeah, nothing to add. I think that's the way to go. You need to get more specialized the closer you get to the event. And if you look at what they also did, it was not just getting more specialized in regards to the exercises they would do. It was also the structure of the week.
Yeah.
Would be laid out in a way to mimic how they would approach the competition. Yeah. So the heavy lifts were placed on, let's say, Saturday or Sunday, whenever the competition or meet would be, creating that rhythm, that adaptation, because your body actually develops a rhythm, and you will be stronger just because of that as well, because it knows when to, where, how would you say? It's like when you're used to train in the morning and then you start training in the evening because of work, the first 2 to 3 weeks will feel horrible. And then slowly but steadily, you will adjust to that new schedule. Yeah. And although you were tired in the beginning, you will be able to perform fairly well at that time. And they would do the same thing with the competition schedule. Not hour of the day, well, also hour of the day, but also the actual day of the week. And the closer you get to the competition, I heard stories about high-level powerlifters missing their bench press because they had internalized their setup, how they would approach the bar, how they would approach the bench, how they would walk out of the platform, and then the bowl with the chalk would stay on the wrong side that they had imagined, and that would throw them off completely. They were so specialized, so narrowly focused. And I think this is the razor's edge you're on, right? You need to be so focused and so specialized on the event, but then you cannot be, you need to have just that little leeway because things might be different than you expect them. I mean, when I was training for the Dinnie stones, I lifted them last year in Scotland.
See, that's where I got the idea of strongman from. See?
Okay.
before we, for those of you who are listening, before we got started with the conversation, I said, hey, right, Sven, you have a background in strongman. He said, no. I was like, what? I saw something on your Instagram. I said, that's where it comes from. There you go.
So the closer I got to the actual date, the more I tried to mimic the actual situation. Like we flew over to Scotland, which means I could not bring any training equipment with me. And the page said, you can bring whatever training equipment that helps you to warm up. I'm like, yeah, well, I will not be able to bring any weights with me. So my goal was to actually do the lift cold. Which worked out in the end. A week before I pulled, so the Dinnie stones are 332 kilos total, and I pulled 352, so 20 kilos more.
Can you explain a little bit on what this actually means?
So the Dinnie
different stones, couple of stones, and then you have
it's actually 2 stones.
2 stones, okay.
Each with a ring, different heights, different weights. So not only is it an uneven weight you have to pull from the floor, like a deadlift, like an elevated deadlift.
Yes.
It's also they're not on the same height.
And you have to pull them at the same time?
You have to pull them at the same time.
Whatever technique you want.
So most people gravitate to something that would look like a sumo stance in the deadlift. Or do you know the Jefferson deadlift?
Yeah, Jefferson curl?
Not the curl, the deadlift.
The Jefferson deadlift.
So you place one leg over the bar. So
of course, where you cross the barbell.
And then you have the arms to the side, basically one.
I saw that on your Instagram.
Yeah. And
here we go.
This is basically how you have to lift the Dinnie stones. Some people do it like with the sumo stance. They have the heavier stone in front of them and the lighter stone behind them. I did it more in the Jefferson stance, but this is hair splitting because in the end you will not see the difference.
Okay.
Look at the picture.
But so it's two stones, different sizes, different height, and different weight.
Yeah.
And you have to lift them simultaneously at the same time.
Like a deadlift. And you have to hold them for at least 2 seconds for a valid lift.
And you mentioned
they have to see a lockout, you have to stand straight, you have to demonstrate control, like in weightlifting.
Yeah.
And then you can drop them.
And then you mentioned you've conquered additional kilos. How's that possible?
Because by now you can get loading pins where you can put on plates to train.
So if you feel really strong, you're like, hey, let's add some weight on the stones.
No, I mean for at home.
At home.
Yes, because that's the best way you can actually prepare yourself for that.
Now I got it. So you prepared at home, you lifted even more than necessary.
Then a buffer, a strength reserve.
Yeah, of course, it's a great idea. And then you went over and you had to lift less than in your training, and that's how you managed it. Got it.
But what threw me off was the ground. I envisioned everything. I was like, okay, there will be people around. There will be, I'm not sure, many distractions. But what I did not realize was that they had us lift the stones from mats on the floor.
From mats?
And they were super soft.
Oh, so the power production is strength production is completely different on soft, on the ground.
You were unstable. It was just completely different than I envisioned it to be.
Oh, you didn't know this beforehand?
No, the videos I was watching, people were just lifting them from the floor.
But why? But why were they using mats?
I think protection of the stones.
Yeah, but that's something you need to know.
You hear stories from the Scottish lifting stones that actually split because people just dropped them on hard surface. And I mean, traditional lifting stones that have a history of over 100 years.
But I mean, you don't lift them on carpet wood, right? You lift them in a place where you can actually drop them,
They changed that. It was just the regular floor outside, like little stone pebbles all over the place, and then they introduced the mats now. So there is one occasion. It's the first Saturday in August every year. They have a little event over there. It's called the Dinnie Day, where you lift them on a wooden platform without the mats. But if on the concrete floor, they put the mats underneath the Dinnie stones just to protect them.
Now I got it. To protect the stones.
Yeah, to protect the stones from breaking.
I'm like, to protect the floor. No. Where am I? Now I get it.
The stones.
Are these some artifacts, kind of like these stones?
The Dinnie stones, yeah. They go back to at least 1868, I think.
Wow, so it's a unique set of stones you have to lift. It's not like, hey, let's do some Atlas stones where you just have these big balls that you have to lift. So who cares where they're from? They just have to wait. Yeah. It's some like artifacts.
They're basically like relics.
Relics. Now I get it. Of course they want to protect them.
You have to sign up for the attempt, and you need to prove worthy, as I like to say, of a elevated deadlift of at least 300 kilos. Otherwise, they won't allow you to make an attempt.
Elevated how high? Shin, knees?
For me, it was just below the knee. I think 52 centimeters.
But it's still massive, man. Still a strong pull, man. 300 kg.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're not able to lift 300 kilos with a barbell,
yeah, you're done. You can forget it.
You don't
you have no
stone.
business of trying to attempt
Yeah,
the stones.
it won't work.
Now you have to prove that you're worthy by demonstrating the strength beforehand before you lift them.
It is also a safety issue. Because if you cannot lift 300 kilos safely, as a solid weight, let's say, you will not be able to lift two stones that are even heavier and
you're
will
going
twist
to get
and
hurt.
bend you.
You're
in different directions if things go wrong. So,
but they're probably more concerned about the stones than about the folks who are lifting them, right? So like, hey, you can get hurt, but don't drop them.
They're Scottish people, right? Rough
kind of
people. So
of course, I can imagine. Now I get it.
No,
fascinating.
super friendly guys. Brad Nickel and his wife are taking care of the stones, and just great people.
Some relics. This is fascinating stuff, man. And it must feel really awesome. Like it's like the heaviest dumbbell, right? Can you lift it? And then it's like, hey, these heavy stones who have a rich history, and if you're able to lift them, like, oh, whoa, awesome.
That's something like, I mean, what I mentioned with the lineage, right? You're part of
you're part of something.
Culture now.
Of course you are.
And
that's a proud moment, man.
I mean, if you haven't watched it, you need to watch Stoneland.
Stoneland.
It's a documentary from Rogue. Huh? So they were involved with Jane and Terry Todd from the University of Texas. Mm-hmm. Terry Todd was actually very, very involved in the Arnold Classic Strongman event, and he was one of the masterminds behind the disciplines. Mm-hmm. They had Dinnie Stone's replicas there. They had replicas of the Inver Stone and whatnot. They introduced the Steinborn squad as a event one year.
Which is, if you study the Steinborn squad, it's like, hey man, they just didn't have a power rack.
Exactly.
How are you supposed to lift a heavy barbell if you don't have a rack? That's where it comes from. Way. Yeah, that's where it comes from. It's awesome.
And they did those amazing documentaries about the stone lifting culture. So they have the first one, I think. Stone lifting culture, wow. Is Levantadores, which is in the Basque country, northern Spain.
Yeah.
That's a little longer than 30 minutes. Then you have Stoneland, which plays in Scotland. It's, I think, 45 minutes or something like that. I watched it 8, 9, 10 times. I can't count anymore. Awesome. And then they did a big one, which is 90 minutes about Iceland. And I mean, just the scenery, it's just beautiful.
Where the giants are from.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
the whole mythology, right?
Isn't it crazy? It's like when you look at the geography of the world, you have these Viking monsters in north, and then you have these eastern bears in the east, right? From Kazakhstan and all these monsters who I think they wake up and they eat stones for breakfast. That's what they look like. These natural strong, like what's his name? The guy. Oh man, he's I forgot his name. He's become a meme. He has a big belly, very strong dude, and Kyriakos something.
I don't know.
And he does. I think he does upright rows, which is so funny, right? Everybody says upright rows are dangerous for the shoulder, and this guy's like lifting 100 kilos, like, and Kyriakos is his name, yeah.
And he's always exceptions to the rule.
And I think he's from Georgia, right? So all these massive monsters in the east, and these giants from the north. I just love this, man. It's fascinating to watch.
I mean, if you look at those old-time strongmen and the stories that are being told about them, even if they did not look as massive as modern bodybuilders and strongman athletes, what they did, it's unbelievable.
But I have to say that I'm reading Edmond Debonnais's book. Kings of Strength. He sometimes mentions things where it's almost unbelievable. It's like, guy, you have to be exaggerating. You have to have read this off a circus plakat. right?
Poster.
Poster, yeah, of course, right? So off a circus poster where the guy's saying, hey, he's lifting 200 kilograms with his pinky up and stuff like this. We're like, this sounds almost impossible. But at the same time, it's fascinating what these guys were lifting and how Edmond Debonet describes them. And Iskender Bey, now I remember the name from the Albanian hero. He was a hero, but he was also kind of a strong Bey. Iskender Bey is his name. He also talks about this guy. He talks about these. It's so fascinating. And at the same time, that makes me proud to be a European, because you see that strong men, many of the strong men on all these feats of strength and even kettlebells come from Europe. I'm not saying that there's not strong guys in India and that it's not documented. We're not saying that, and that's sometimes where I get flack from, where I'm saying, yeah, it's from Europe. Yeah, but the Indians did it as well. Of course, I'm probably yes, but it's documented history that I'm reading off. And if you have your evidenced history, please let me know. Of course, I mean, if you look at mace training and you look at the club bells and the mills, that's Indians. Indians were using that stuff to a certain extent.
I think it's liftingstones.org, the homepage that's dedicated to the whole stone lifting culture worldwide, and you see feats from all over the places. I mean, if you look at China with I'm not sure how the weights are called. They are actually
stone locks.
Yeah, the stone locks.
Yeah.
Similar to a kettlebell.
Yeah, exactly. They clean and jerk it.
Yeah, and then you have. I mean, that is just something universal, I think, in the human culture.
Exactly, and that's why I'm so into this. So when Geronimo shared his evidence, and he went to he really took it very far with the evidence that he was going to museums, he was calling them for all this research, and that's one of the the reasons why I know that there is a Hans Steirer museum in Munich dedicated to Hans Steirer, the strongman.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, I gotta visit this once. This is fascinating. But we don't have, of course, we live in Europe, so we don't have probably as much evidence from the Asian part of the population. But I'm sure, since we're all human, it's the same there. Just probably, like you said, same but different.
Going back to the martial arts and Guru Dan, I mean, he was talking about that one night in one of the classes he taught. He was like, we all share basically the exact same body structure.
Exactly.
And if you look at the martial arts in a very broad sense, there's the same systems emerging on every continent, in every country. It depends a little bit on the, let's say, circumstances.
And culture, probably.
Yep, there are some elements involved, but there's some kind of striking, there's some kind of wrestling, and there's some kind of weapon system usually. And if you look at, I mean, this is how an elbow works, right? There's only one way to break it. Exactly. People figure out those things. Exactly. And the entrance, let's say, for a given technique might look different, but ultimately it's roughly all the same. There's nothing new,
because the human body structure is the same. So
the structure that you're working and the structure with which you're working is exactly the same.
So people probably come to the same conclusions through different paths.
Yeah, I mean, it's an older movie, Fearless, with Jet Li.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful conversation towards the end with the Japanese master his character is having, and they're talking about tea. And he says, in the end, it doesn't matter about the tea. It depends on the mood of the person who's drinking the tea, whether it's a good tea or not. And then they make the transfer into the martial arts. And I think that is the exact same conversation in regards to physical training, whether you like to train hard style or sport style, whether you like to train with kettlebells or barbells or body weight or sandbags, maces, clubs, whatnot. It just depends on the person. If it's a capable person, they will thrive with any implement.
Anything.
It does not matter.
Very good point. See, when it comes to the styles, I've stopped following the rule of style, and I started adopting the idea of intent.
Having no way as way. Bruce Lee.
Exactly.
That's the essence of his thinking.
Exactly. It's not the idea that I want to train in a given style. The idea is, let's put it like this. In the recent conversation with Gregor Sobochan, which I've had last week, that's why it's so present. We talked about the clean and jerk, right? The long cycle, the jerk, the snatch. And then he said something which, and I get a lot of flack for this on YouTube because I'm the guy, when I have a thought and when I think something, I put it into a video, I put it into material, and then I shoot it out there. And I don't care about, let's put it like this, I don't care about my opinion, I rather care about evidence. So the more that I learn, it happened often that I had to change my opinion. So then I'm changing what I believe, or I change what I... For example, I always critique the hardstyle snatch because I'm saying, yeah, it's not true explosiveness. But here you come with a simple statement saying, but it depends on the condition, right? You have somebody who never trained before, or maybe not trained in that intensity. It does train their explosiveness. Not in a true sense, but it's still something that they can work with.
People more explosive, definitely.
Exactly. See, sometimes I'm missing things the more I talk about it. That's why I love these conversations, because they open up my mind.
You're always learning.
Yeah. So when it comes to this conversation with Gregor Sobochan, we talked about the long cycle. And then we talked about the idea of the jerk and the rack position and having the elbows close to the body. And it depends. The funny thing about a solid jerk or a solid clean and jerk and long cycle in that sense, if you have a short torso and long arms, you're golden. Because you're able to reach your iliac crest very easy. You only have to bend your T-spine just a little bit, and you can keep your knees locked, you can keep everything locked, but you can rest the whole weight on the structure, therefore you can rest more, you don't fatigue as fast. Okay, that's one thing, which I got. And then he said, if you work with the belt, that's what I found out as well. I just ordered a belt from Arjani Zherenakov. Shout out to Arjani for providing me with an awesome kettlebell. I call it the kettle belt now. It's so great for jerk and long cycle. And then he said something. He said, Gregor said, you know, long cycle and jerk is very technical exercise. Okay. As soon as you have the technique down pat, you have to build some strength because you have to be able to rack the weights. I mean, if you don't have, let's call it structural strength, you won't be able to rack double 32s. Doesn't matter how strong, how tall, how heavy you are. You need some integrity. But as soon as you have the integrity, the structural strength, and the technique, it becomes a cardiovascular exercise.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? I thought about it. I got the belt. I think I got it a couple of days ago. Put it on. And the beautiful thing about the belt, and let me show it to you. I want to show it all.
I'm curious now.
It's such a cool thing. I'm so proud of it. And he did such a great job. Arjani, if you're watching this, so this is the kettle belt.
Nice.
Right? Look at it. I didn't even make a video about it yet because I have to make one. But this is wild leather. How do we call this in English? Swede leather? Swede, S-U-E-E-D, I think. But who cares? It's just an awesome piece of equipment. And then here's the thing. Here's the major difference to a normal powerlifting belt.
Yeah, I can see it.
Right here.
Mm-hmm.
So what is this for? You
Put
have
the
to
elbows on.
Exactly. You have to give Arjani your measurements, and as soon as you're able to rack the weights, and you have solid technique, you can rest pretty long. Let's put it like this, even with heavier weights, and then it truly becomes a, let's put it like, maybe 20%, 30% explosive. And 70% cardiovascular endurance if you do it for long sets of time for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever have you. And after this realization, I was like, wow. So now, if I pick up double 32, not double 30, that's when I'm really warmed up, and these are very heavy. But let's pick up my normal weight is double 24s. Now I go at it with a different mindset when I put the belt on. Then I engage into proper solid breathing, which I've done before, but now it's like, hey, it's supposed to become a cardiovascular exercise. So breathe properly, don't tense too much, be as fluid as possible, focus on the lockout, focus on the technique, and then it becomes a cardiovascular exercise. And I was like, wow. So these are some certain realizations where I understand, okay, but Gregory, I want to have some strong shoulders and build some solid muscle up here. Okay, rack those belts, keep them close to the body. Don't use no belt, use tension, strict press them up, and come back slowly. Right? Similar movement pattern, but different intent. And that's why I think Pavel's teachings make sense, because if you look at it from that perspective, if you build strength and muscle with kettlebells, it makes sense. If you look at it through the lens from the kettlebell sport perspective, it doesn't make sense.
No,
because then it's like you're using the same or a similar implement, even though I have to critique the clean and jerk to a certain extent from the hard styles folks, but let's not jump on it because we've been on it for too long now. And I have one question that I have to ask you. But it's just I'm realizing intent matters, and this dictates what kind of biomechanical movement pattern you will put on display. Period.
Nothing to add. You need, I mean, that goes back to McGill to some degree, right? It depends. You cannot judge anything without context. The right technique needs context. What am I going to do? What do I want to do? What are the adaptations I'm looking for? What person is going to do the exercise?
Yeah.
But yes, we have different, or let's say a given set of standards, instructions, whatever you want to call it, on what we want to see when somebody performs a given exercise.
Good point.
But the specifics you have to gear to the situation.
Most definitely.
If you would not give, let's go back to the example with the squat, you would not give the same cues to a weightlifter squatting than you would give to a powerlifter squatting. How a endurance athlete, a marathon guy runs is different than how a sprinter runs. It's geared to their specific goal.
Even though it kind of melts to a certain extent, and that's why I think human beings are so awesome. Look at the guy who ran the marathon. Where was it? Was it Berlin or something? He ran it in 2 hours and 2 minutes or something like this.
Berlin.
Was Berlin the king?
I think the recent record was done in Berlin.
And that's like what, 20 kilometers per hour? Are you crazy? I mean, when I run fast on the skill on the we have a treadmill, but they call it skill mill. It's not the normal treadmill. It's where you perform the energy. If I run really fast, Martin, if I run really fast, I achieve maybe, let's say, 15, 16, but then I'm like, I'm running like a gepard, right?
Yeah.
So I'm huge strides and huffing and puffing. And you want to tell me that this dude is going even faster than I am for 2 hours?
Yeah, it's just crazy.
That's what human beings are just, humans are awesome. It's crazy. Last point, Sven, if I may ask. Last point. I could talk to you for hours. I almost say this on every podcast, man, because it's so fascinating to talk to folks, even though we might differ in certain let's say, like, conclusions. It's still awesome to have these conversations because we're adding, it's like you said, we're adding to the lineage of even discussing the matter, which I think is so awesome.
There's a quote by Dave, the Iron Tamer Whitley, former Strongforce master instructor, performing strongman, super strong guy, awesome guy. And it was something like, at the end of the day, we have more in common than there are difference between us. He was alluding to, it was something in regards to weight training. And he was like, yes, it may look different on the outside, but actually we're all trying to do the same.
So
And
totally
there are
agree.
no clear borders,
cut.
let's say.
It's fluid.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, man.
A little more of this, a little less of this, and
Exactly.
it depends on the situation, on the person.
Exactly. And how did you prep for the stones with the weights? What do you do?
Fairly simple, to be honest. Like I said, the first thing you need to be able to do is an elevated deadlift, a rack pull of at least 300 kilos. So that was my first goal. I was very, very lucky to have Jason Marshall from Texas. He's one of our master instructors in Strong First, who did the Dinnie stones in 2019, I think, if I remember correctly. And he helped me a lot. I mean, I actually called him on the day. I was like, you know what? It's going to be 4 p.m. in Scotland, I think. If it's possible, I would like to do a video call with you, because then you can be there with me. And he even got me a little coaching after I failed my first attempt.
Oh, you failed your first attempt.
Yeah. But he basically guided me through the whole process. So a very simple linear cycle, classic powerlifting cycle to get to the 300 kilos in the rack pull. Then transitioning to those training pins you can load, which is basically going from GPP to SPP, right?
Exactly.
Making it more specific to the competition.
To the lift, yeah.
Yeah. And then more like the, let's say, easy strength idea from Dan, John, and Pavel from their book. Like getting a feel for the different weights, the different heights to pull from, just to get adjusted. And then basically 2 linear cycles.
Yeah.
Again,
linear programming, right?
Yeah, more or less. At one point, because we talked before recording, I started physiotherapy school last year in April.
Exactly. Yeah.
Stopped working at the gym, so I had to look for another place where I could do the heavy lifting at least once a week. And what I was basically like a daily top set. So I had a linear progression in mind, but if I didn't feel like it, I would just reduce the weights accordingly. And that worked like magic, to be honest. So going back to what we said earlier, just invest a little patience in the process. And
and trust the process, right?
Yeah.
Trust it.
I mean, I pulled the actual weight of the Dinnie stones 5 months before my attempt in Scotland. So I knew that I would be able to do that in regards of pure strength. And I did it 2 months before, and then 1 week before I lifted 20 kilos heavier than the actual weight of the stone. So,
which is powerful, man. Congratulations, man. This is awesome.
Thank you very much.
And when it comes to the let's say like your, how can I say this? Your genetic outlook on strength. Would you consider yourself to have always been kind of a strong guy? Was it always like your forte, or did you build on it? I mean, you probably built on it, of course, but
is it something I pondered? Well, many times throughout the last years, because I got that question from several people. And if you would see my father and his, let's say, history, he started working physically when he was 14. So there's definitely some genetic potential, let's say, from his side. But I always, which I count as a blessing, actually, I always had to work for the achievements. So people are looking at me sometimes like, oh yeah, you're a strong guy, you're just going to lift whatever there's in front of you. But when I go back to think about, let's say, my achievements, there was always a longer process than I envisioned it to be. So yes, there is some disposition, let's say, for strength, but I think that to some degree everybody has that. But I have to put in the work.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, more than people think.
Yeah.
This is just an honest answer, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the Beast Tamer Challenge in Strong First, which is a 48 kg military press, a pull-up with 48 kg and a pistol squat. I would not be able to do that right now. And a lot of people think, oh yeah, you're a natural born beast tamer. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
But yeah, still, yeah. I mean, these are feats which are close to the extreme. And if you want to move weights close to the extreme, then you still have to put in the work, right? I mean, this is just important to note. And I didn't want to just, if somebody has the intention like, oh, he just wants to downplay his achievement, I don't want to do it.
No.
And I most definitely believe that you had to put in the work. And how heavy is your general body weight? Where did you fluctuate strongly, or was it like, hey, when I was 20, I was like 80 plus and that's it?
Well, I think so over the last almost 8-9 years, plus minus 100 kilos, give or take 1 or 2 kilos. So mostly I'm 100 or 104, something in that. So actually not below, but I stay pretty consistent in that range.
And how tall are you?
186, 187.
Yeah. So I would classify you rather as I love this when we classify human beings or categorize human beings. I heard this once in a video and I was like, I love this. I'm going to use this forever. You have, in human beings, general population, you have 2 categories. One is the bear and the other is the wolf. So the bear is the strong one who's using a flail to kill enemies with one hit. And the wolf is a smaller one who's fast, who kills 5 enemies in like 1 minute because he slits the throat, right? Something like this, right? So, because the reason why I'm mentioning this is just understanding physiology and the extremes. If you are very strong, or if you have a lot of endurance, crazy endurance, like the marathon runner.
Yeah.
These are extremes on display when it comes to human performance. And extremes always have a genetic potential attached to them. You will never be able to lift or deadlift that weight that, for example, Eddie Hall and Hafthor lifted. I would assume if you don't have it in you, because here's my thing. I struggled forever with heavyweights. I was having fun with them, but my max, I'm 170 centimeters, and my normal, let's call it like this, the natural body weight that I fluctuate is between 70 and 75, right? So my heaviest bench was 110 kg, my heaviest deadlift was 170, and my heaviest squat was something like 130 and something, but it completely broke me. So I realized, and we also say that you tend to follow the path that you feel like your body performs the best at? I felt like that's not with heavyweights. I'll never be freakishly strong, no matter what kind of program I put on. I think I can add to my strength, most definitely, but I'll never be able to, or maybe I'm putting this limit on myself, but just the way I felt it. That's why I wanted to ask this question.
I don't think you're putting a limit on yourself if you think along those lines. It's work with your body. Exactly. Don't work against it. There are genetic differences, quite substantial genetic difference between people. And if you ignore that, if you try to, how do they say in English? If you try to force the round peg in the square hole, Either one of those are going to break. So it will not work for you in the long run. That doesn't mean, I mean, that's the thing. That doesn't mean that you cannot be strong, because being strong is something that exceeds the physical thing by a lot. And it's something people should be aware of. Yes, we're talking about strength training a lot and moving heavy weights, but still, it's also that, how would you say, that that psychological
the mental
happens.
game.
Yes,
yeah.
You develop, you change as a person with the training process. If you clearly said that, okay, this is actually going to break me instead of making me better or building me, then screw the heavy weights. You can get reasonably strong with kettlebells. And if you made the experience that you're more gravitating to the, let's say, endurance side of thing, why not do that? I mean,
exactly.
Derek Toshner, another of our master instructors, we have something that's called the tactical strength challenge, with a max attempt deadlift like in powerlifting, then maximum repetition pull-up, and 5-minute snatch test. And he won that, I think, 14 times. And he put up numbers in each 3 of the categories like crazy. At one point, he completely reinvented himself and is now moving more towards endurance feats.
Fascinating.
So why not?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, if you have the capabilities. And that's what I think.
If you realize that one thing actually suits you better than what you did before, I think it would just be stupid to not change your approach.
Yeah. I think also realizing your limitations and your weaknesses is a strength by itself.
Yeah, because you can feed the strength, because you realize that your strength lies at a different point, and shifting gears.
Exactly.
It takes courage.
Yeah.
You have to give up what you currently are, what you currently probably define yourself with.
And of course, and good point that you're mentioning defining yourself with, because in today's day and age, where we are so easily defined on social media and on YouTube by the way we look, what we pull, what we do, especially in the fitness realm, it is so easy to get lost in this misconception of what fitness really is. So many times I heard it on the YouTube channels, like when I say, hey, this is great to build muscle, and then some folks, I mean, you always have these comments, but it's like, hey, you don't even have muscle. What are you talking about? Right? So while I do get it, if you are used to scrolling through a feed filled with, let's put it like this, medically induced muscle or chemically enhanced bodies, of course, you look at my physique, which I'm proud of, and I'm grateful that it works, and that I'm healthy. I'm grateful to God that I can even exist. I went a little bit beyond. It's not about just strength and looks in general. It's about other qualities as well. Then of course your perspective will be skewed because you have a completely different set point than I have. And that's something that I've even realized when it's like, when you look at, and I don't want to down talk bodybuilding, because I think bodybuilding is cool, but it took on forms where we can have a debate if it's still cool or not, but that's another discussion. But the idea is, hey, you should be as strong as you look. That's something that I'm like internalizing for myself. So if we have bulging muscles but we're not mobile, we can't run, it's like if we only focus on one physical quality of human performance and leave all the others aside, from my perspective, that's weakness. But I'm not out there yelling at everybody, even though on my channel I yell a bit, but that's my own thing, right? I can yell on my own platform. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you're used to a certain ideal, and then you look at somebody else talking about strength or muscle or fitness who doesn't look like that, and you have a limited understanding, then you probably say something. And if you're not you probably say something on this channel or to this person, and if you as a creator or coach or athlete or fitness personality or practitioner is not mentally stable enough, you will probably think that there's something wrong with you. Like, oh yeah, I don't have, yes, if I compare myself to this, yeah, I don't have muscle. I stopped talking about muscle. You get what I'm coming from?
I think that's one of the dangers of social media.
No.
The comparison side of thing. You start comparing yourself with images that, I mean, there exists something that's called Photoshop. Let's leave it at that, okay? And also the other thing,
and AI.
Add
this to the mix, man.
So, but also, I mean, people are getting rude in the comment section. They would not tell you something like that if they would stand face to face to you. Mm-hmm. So that makes things very, very dangerous to some degree, I think. Mm-hmm. But then also speaking about the whole thing, like being as strong as you look, I think you should be stronger than you look. I think. I mean, it's always so impressive to see somebody performing that doesn't look like it at all. Yes. I mean, let's go back to the Dinnie stones, for example. The first man to replicate Donald Dinnie's feat with the Dinnie stones was Jack Shanks, I think police officer from Ireland, and he lifted the Dinnie stones in tie and suit. And if you would see him walking on the street, never ever would you have believed that. It's just unbelievable what people can have for strength, and you don't see it from the outside. It's one thing in the strength world. It's one thing when you think of it as from the, let's say, martial perspective. I think it's good to be a little unassuming.
I love that. I get your angle.
In today's world, you're not going to let's say pull any unnecessary attention on you. But also when people underestimate you, that's always an advantage to have on your side as well.
I see. Concealed carry.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I mean, going back to strength training competition, it gives a false impression to your competitors. I mean, it's also a psychological game, right? If you think, oh, I'm going to outperform that guy, and then he lifts, I don't know, 20 kilos more than you.
He destroys you on the platform, and then you lose it even more. And that's why, you're mentioning something that just came to mind, which I think is such a great mantra to live by when I train, is I call it the poker face or the assassin's face.
Yeah.
When you pull, when you train, doesn't matter whether if it's strength, endurance, or explosiveness, that calm look on your face. Like the Russians do it. It's like they go in a trance or something.
I just want to say, do you know what Pavel calls it? The Russian happy face.
Russian happy face.
Completely emotionless.
Exactly. And I love this. And there's even some science behind it when you read what Dr. Yuri Verkhoshansky says. He says, as particularly for the locomotion side of things, for high endurance events, he says, if no muscles are constrained in the face of a runner, it is a display of skill.
Yeah. Yep.
He doesn't say the same though about heavy weightlifting. So
no, that's different. Yeah.
He puts them differently, right? But that's a great mantra to live by. It's like concealed carry, right? Mm-hmm. Be unassuming.
Yeah.
It's like you lift these weights and the face doesn't change. It's like, oh, whoa, that looks easy. Okay, let me try this. Mm-hmm. And like, oh my God. So that's something like, wow, keep it to yourself. So, and you know what it's like, right? Your inner systems are, I always tell our clients, you feel the Christmas tree lighting up in your brain, right? Because especially for people, I love this. When you have people for the first time ever on a bench with a barbell, I love what happens. And it happens all the time. And I can explain it to them, but they don't understand until they feel it. So it's like they unrack the bell and at the barbell, and then they start moving, right? And then before we even start, I tell them, listen, there's one peculiar thing about the bench press, the barbell bench press, and that is if you pull a heavy deadlift, or if you pull a deadlift, if the weight gets too heavy, you drop it, right? Or you don't even lift it. That's it. With a heavy squat, if you feel like I can't go anymore, you rack it, right? But with the squat is probably similar to the bench press. But when you bench it and the barbell goes down, there comes this, if you're not used to it, there comes this feeling of you are getting squished.
Yeah.
Because when the weight lands down on your chest and you are not able to bring it back up, you're going to die, right? So that's something that's fascinating about the barbell and the barbell bench press. And then, you know what happens with our clients sometimes? The feet jump up. It's like the feet want to run away from the bench. They start tweaking and moving, and then I'm like, relax, relax. I rack it, and it's very, with easy weights. I rack it out. See, that's what I told you. It's this, the feeling comes up, the Christmas tree lights up, and you feel like you're dying. Now, what are we going to learn now? We're going to learn, even though your system is telling you that you're about to die, I just want you to push. I want you to keep the face calm, because first of all, I believe I have the confidence that you can press this weight. And second of all, you have a spotter behind you. So I'm going to take care of you. Don't worry. And that's right. That's the mental game.
Yeah. And I mean, that is something I think very important in the whole training process as well. You slowly but steadily get comfortable, A, with the heavy weights, and B, also with the uncomfortable situations. I mean, it's not like let's say in martial arts like jiu-jitsu, where there's constant pressure on you and you have to learn to deal with that. But it's similar in a different way. And that will, over time, increase the confidence in yourself and your abilities outside of strength training. It's learning to stay calm. Like the unnecessary effort, right?
Exactly.
Developing confidence, which will translate into self-confidence at one point, I think is something that it might be one of the benefits of strength training that I found for myself.
Yeah, the mental game is, I think it's a tide that lifts all boats. Yeah. The mental, the strength, especially if you do it, let's call it the proper way, where most of the time your whole system is engaged. You're switching the training modalities a little bit, or you can stick with kettlebells, but you get comfortable with the uncomfortable position of the rack. And you get comfortable that when you press the weight overhead, it wants to pull to the left or to the right, whatever have you. You have to keep it stable. You have to go comfortable with these uncomfortable, awkward positions. And funny thing is, you're talking about it translates into other areas of your life. Just, I think yesterday. Yeah, yesterday or 2 days ago, I had a call with a marketing agency which I want to hire to build the business more. So we had this conversation. It was 1.5 hours. So I tell him what we want, blah, 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 blah. And then, well, we can help you with this, blah, blah, blah. We have an awesome program, blah, blah, blah. And then he shares the price with me. And he did it in a very, I know these tactics because I read the book of this guy. I'm a little bit into marketing. The more I learn, the more I understand how these guys do it. And I was anticipating it. But if you are in this situation, it hits different.
Yeah.
So then he shares the price with me, and I was like, are you serious, man? This is okay. I know you guys are worth it. I know the value behind it, but this is outrageous. And then he calms me down. He did a great job. And after the call, I was like, listen, I cannot decide right now because I had a client coming up, so I'm under pressure. So please, if it's possible, give me a couple of hours and I'll give you feedback. And he's like, hey, I'm going to check in with my boss. I'll let you know. So he writes me the email a couple of minutes later, says, hey, we give you a couple of more hours, but just make sure you reply at least in 24 hours. I was like, okay. So then I had a discussion with one of our clients. And so I think where the training helped me, or what training generally helps me, is I get used to being in awkward positions and strange situations and out of my comfort zone. Just recently, I thought about, I did a every minute on the minute session, and I was like, oh, I'm not gonna do this. This is too hard in the system. The voice came up, and I was like, but I did it anyway.
Yeah.
But that inner voice didn't stop. It was like, come on, let's take 2 reps down. And it wasn't I wasn't destroying myself, but I was like, I'm pushing myself a little bit into the red zone. And I was like, nah, man, no. But I did it anyways.
Yeah.
And so with the call, when I hung up, I know this is forcing you out of your comfort zone again, like you're used to with the training. And the price of the program, just make sure that you're gonna stick with it. I'm able to afford it? Yes. It's a huge investment? Yes. But he said something on the call. He was like, hey, if you would be already there where you want to be, we wouldn't have this conversation.
Yeah.
So I hate doing it. Data, analytics, I don't like it, but I have to do it. The same with training sometimes. I feel like, nah, man. But since I've gotten used to it, I'm pushing through the comfort zone, and I'm always willing to exit it because I know this is where growth happens.
What Stephen Pressfield calls the resistance. You feel the most resistance before doing the stuff that matters most.
Oh. Who said this?
Stephen Pressfield. The War of Art.
Wait, Stephen Pressfield.
Yes. So Pressfield.
Yes, press and field, huh?
Yes, exactly.
And the book, The War?
The War of Art.
It's like the art of war from Sun Tzu.
Switched. Yes.
The War of Art.
Yeah.
And say that again. That was so powerful.
Oh, it's just paraphrased. So he calls it resistance, capital R. And he says you feel the most resistance before the tasks that are the most important to do.
Wow, that's so
that
true.
will have the most impact. So the higher the resistance you feel, the more it's actually going to be the thing that pays off for you.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
And yeah, I found that to be true.
Wow.
The things you want to push off and not do
these are the things. And funny thing is, we tell this our clients as well.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't like these squats. Exactly why we do them.
Mm-hmm. There's a reason why you're not liking them, because you're not good at it. But to get good at it, you have to do it.
Yes. And I would also add, the squat is such a beneficial exercise with so much skill transfer into everyday life. It would be a shame of me or a pity if we wouldn't do it unless you are. But that doesn't happen. Then you probably have to visit a physiotherapist or
I'm not sure who said that, but it's basically like long before the squat is an exercise, it's a fundamental human movement pattern.
Exactly.
So
it is.
You have to be able to do that.
Yeah.
If you're not, then work on it to regain the squat.
Powerful.
Yeah.
It is what it is, man. Hey, I shared like a couple of times that I'm on my final point, and now we're at it for 2 hours and 30 minutes. I think the more I do this, the longer the conversations get. But I have really
go on forever.
I really love it, man. It's so enlightening, man. It's so awesome to talk to you. So really, one final point, and because I want to give you some, I just want to listen to what you're saying. What is strong endurance? Can you describe this for me?
Wow, you should get Pavlov for this.
But the way you understand it.
Strong endurance, it is about the anti-glycolytic training on which the Soviets and also the Swedes did a lot of studies in the 60s, 70s, and also in the 50s. So basically, the goal is to mitigate the glycolytic energy system because of the many drawbacks it brings. So you want to maximize the alactic system and the aerobic system. um, to basically its full potential.
And
It's an umbrella term, so different protocols fall under the strong endurance term.
and what kind of protocol would
So
you
the most
describe?
recent one would be the X.
His new book, right?
Yes, that's a new one. So it's what used to be called A plus A. So X, the acronym stands for, it's just a little rearranged. It's, oh gosh, aerobic training for explosive exercises. It targets the fast fibers. It targets mitochondrial efficiency, effectiveness, size, and amount in the fast twitch fibers. That's the let's say the physiological adaptations you're after. The protocols are super simple. It's like 5 snatches on the minute or 5 swings on the minute for up to 40 sets, let's say.
Did you goes completely against what I understand when it comes to endurance? Did you read, or are you aware? Of course you are. Dr. Kenneth J.
Yep. But
Did
I
you
haven't read any of his material.
check out his recent book, The Cardio Code?
I've heard of the book.
Yeah, I read it in 2 nights or 2 evenings. It's loaded with scientific, and he says a couple of things in the book where how can I say this? I don't think he goes against Pavel, but he says he has not, I'm paraphrasing, he has risen above. It's a little bit above what he used to believe, what endurance is all about. And then he goes into clear, cut and dry examples of what endurance really is, explains how the heart works. He goes really into massive detail. It's like, wow, I got to read it probably three or four more times to really understand just the gist of how the heart is built.
Yeah.
So he goes so
more about the physiological adaptations in the heart and stuff like that, right?
And the physiological adaptations, he says the following, and he undermines it with a lot of scientific evidence. The book is filled with studies and trials. And and I think in the beginning of the book he said, yes, I've heard about like some of these studies that you've mentioned. I've heard about them, but he couldn't find them anywhere. He couldn't find them on PubMed. He couldn't find them on blah, 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 blah. And then he says something like, maybe they were hidden somewhere in a library of an old Russian university or whatever have you. But the stuff that he draws from is publicly available. And I think he says something like, if it is scientifically worth it to a certain extent, something like this, I'm just paraphrasing, I read it a long time ago, then it should be available on all these platforms that he is in.
Apparently not. As far as I know, only studies up to, so after the 70s are actually digitalized. To go and find the studies from the 50s, 60s, 70s, you would have to go into the actual libraries and look them up.
Let me check this real quick, and I have to read it to you. It's such an amazing book, man. And it just puts a different perspective on where did I download it even? Let me see if because I have to. It was iBooks. If you have a couple of more minutes, I'm gonna share this with you because it's so fascinating. I think it's iBooks. Yeah, I bought it from Amazon. I have it open right now. So, for example, he says this. Check this out. It's something different. Here you go. Listen. When a person does weight training, even if the person lifts the weight as fast as possible, the prolonged muscular contractions compared to locomotive activities like running, rowing, biking, skiing will occlude blood flow in the working muscles until the muscles relax. This is called reactive hyperemia. As long as the muscles are contracted, no blood will pass through.
Yep.
But as soon as the muscular tension is released, a surge of blood will rush through the muscle. A contracted muscle with limited blood perfusion has significant consequences on the cardiovascular system, because now an elevated concentration of metabolic byproducts will be noticeable as the muscle is forced to work anaerobically without the oxygen. The heart has to work harder as the systemic resistance has increased. The lack of oxygen in the capillaries of the working muscles will fire blah, 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 blah. This causes an increase in heart rate, but does not get more oxygen into the muscles. As the heart rate increases and more blood is pumped faster into the systemic circulation, the LV of the heart has to contract more forcefully. So at the end of the day, what he's saying with this is, if you use weights to do cardio, you are not doing cardio. You have to do cardiovascular training with locomotive exercises, running, skiing, cycling, and anything else is not cardiovascular training because it changes the adaptations of the heart. I just read you a couple of things of it.
I heard that quote. Now, one thing, the adaptations Pavel is after with strong endurance are not targeted at the heart. It's more the energy pathways, the energy systems of the body. He makes differentiations between, let's say, the kettlebell quick lifts, strength exercises, or running in regards to the muscle constrictions. But you would have to talk with him. I'm not deep in the material, to be honest.
The thing is, why call it endurance then? Because endurance has to do with cardio. So it's heart. And so,
endurance
see, that's
also, to some degree, just means being able to repeat a given, let's say, movement with proper quality for a longer duration.
Yes. And that always involves the heart.
Yep. But you don't need to target the heart with adaptations to increase the endurance at all. The energy systems.
Are you sure?
He
says something completely different.
Dive into the strong endurance material.
But from a physiological perspective, he says,
I know
the powerlifter's heart versus the marathon runner's heart.
Yeah,
the powerlifter's heart has the thickened wall,
of course,
where the stroke volume becomes smaller, and these are adaptations of the heart that we don't want. So we have to have a blood flow from the muscles up to the heart that doesn't occlude blood flow. So not muscular tension occludes blood flow with weights. So we have to do these typical cardiovascular exercises like locomotion. What I would add is, I would assume that a kettlebell sports snatch, the way we do it with this complete relaxation process and blah, 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 this would probably classify as a cardiovascular exercise as well. And he goes into detail of this as well. Man, you have to read this book. And I saw a lot of people ask me, like, did you read Axe? I was like, what? What are you guys talking about? I have Pavel's new book. I was like, oh, of course.
Yeah, I have it right in front of me. I'm looking for the passage, but I can't find it, to be honest. Yes, he differentiates between those things exactly. And this is why certain things will not work with the strength exercises, but work with the quick lifts, where you also can relax the grip in between so that the blood flow is not restricted anymore.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we do this all the time, the way we snatch and swing.
I'm not that deep into the material when it comes to the physiological adaptations and the biochemistry. Either read the Quick and the Dead and Axe, or attend the Strong Endurance seminar.
I'll definitely check out Axe. Yeah.
He can answer those questions for you.
Here, I got it. Watch this. Where is this? He says this, the source referenced in the quote. He quotes, original source unknown. Voropayev tested two groups of subjects in pull-ups and standing broad jump, a 100-meter sprint and a 1K run. He put the control group on a program that emphasized the above tests. The experimental group lifted kettlebells. In spite of the lack of practice on the tested exercises, the kettlebell group scored better in every one of them. Kettlebell group meaning they tested better in, I think, cardiovascular training. Then he says, the source referenced in the quote was not possible to find anywhere other than in commercial kettlebell training books available in the United States, which made doing a study on it even more interesting. Even back then, I knew that if the original studies were not available via university libraries, PubMed, or Medline, chances for the existence of the research would be pretty low. And even if it did exist in some like I told you, and even if it did exist in some handwritten Russian language format, it would be highly unlikely that it would live up to any of the standards required for a scientific publications and established knowledge today. Therefore, I was highly motivated to try and take the initial step in getting some actual data on the cardiovascular responses to maximal kettlebell work. And then he goes a little bit deeper. Fascinating book, man. And I have to read Pavel's
to reach out to Pavel, and he will answer emails like that. You could also go on the StrongFirst forum, because there's a general discussion about kettlebell X, and Pavel actually answers the question. I know from the seminar in Stuttgart that there was a guy who asked for the references for the material, and he was like, I just should ask Pavel, or Pavel actually told me which of the citations he was interested in, and he will send him the material. So
did he follow up then?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I'm not sure where he got those things from. But that's at least one of the explanations I have for some lack of the studies, is that anything prior to the 80s is, let's say 95% is not digitalized.
And
so
see,
you won't find that on PubMed.
Where it gets a little murky is that, but Pavel has access to it, right? So that for me, it gets a little
he went into I'm not sure where he got them from. He's from Russia. I think he has the material from years collected when he was still living there.
Okay, but look at, for example, just saying, when you look at what the Russian literature actually says, and documented Russian literature like Dr. Yuri Verkhochansky, cardiovascular training is locomotion. Talk to the kettlebell sport guys, they say most important, running, swimming. Running, swimming,
yeah, for the traditional cardiovascular training.
Exactly, right?
Definitely. But strong endurance targets different adaptations.
But what kind of endurance then, right? If I want to build, let's say like marathon endurance, do the run, man. Build the volume. There you go.
Yeah, sure. If you're a marathon runner, of course.
And what kind of endurance is Axton talking about? Well, I read the book most definitely, but I just don't get it.
Yes, it's called strong endurance, but it's targeted on the certain adaptations in the muscle fibers, so that they endure longer and are able to work longer.
Local endurance. Yes, so that the muscle, right, the actual muscle is able to perform.
Mitochondrial respiration.
Yes, and this all depends on the heart, doesn't it?
Not 100%, no.
So you can adapt the muscle without you can't even not involve the heart.
No, you cannot. You cannot not involve the heart. But it depends on how the muscle has to work, on how intense the muscle has to work.
Okay, so
periods in between the work.
Yeah, I get that. So let me ask you another question: who would profit from this X protocol, 5 snatch every minute?
Who not? Not some high-level endurance athletes, of course not. But let's say general population, you can do it with the swing.
Yeah, sure. Of course. But then, you're having general adaptations, which is awesome. But he implicitly says, or he implicitly goes down that route where you're saying, hey, we build endurance a different way, right? And this is where it...
not the traditional endurance runners need. Let's say, because, I mean, you won't do kettlebell snatches if your goal is to run a marathon, but you can use similar protocols or templates from the Strong Endurance Manual also to running. It's more geared towards, let's say, team sports, combat sports, and the kind of endurance, in quotation, you need there.
But I mean, look at boxers, they run.
Yeah, road work
Right.
builds a foundation, sure.
Yeah. So this is just where I'm trying to get at. It's just understanding. But I'll read the book most definitely. And see, that's why I love being this open minded. And I asked Dr. Kenneth Che to appear on the podcast, but he didn't got the email or something. I'm hitting him up on the Instagram, always sliding into his DMs, hoping that one day he'll be like, okay, let's do this. But just this is where I'm having questions where it doesn't add up, because endurance is built like this, strength is built like this. There's something in between, of course, which even Thierry Sanchez alludes to, who was, I think he was also a master of sport, who in his thesis on his doctorate's degree did something on kettlebell sport where he's talking about special endurance that you need when you do, for example, a kettlebell long cycle 10-minute set, because it's actually crazy. You want to talk about endurance, but you're working with these heavy weights. So he says it's called hybrid or special endurance, and the East Europeans refer to it. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. He also doesn't have studies to back this up. So this is why I'm always like, I get what you're saying, but give me some data, man. I want to see, especially when we talk about this, not just, hey, do some GPP. Hey, man, some squats, some running, some press. Awesome, you're good. But as soon as we take it into specialized territory, endurance, strength, blah, 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 this is when I want some data. But the first data point that I'm going to get is I have to read Pavel's book on it.
You have,
most definitely. I'll do it.
I think there's
and
no
you got to check out cardio code from Dr. Kenneth Che.
Definitely.
And see, that's why I love to. I mean, I'd love to have Pavel on the podcast. I asked them, but they replied back. They're like, he doesn't do podcast. He doesn't do podcasts, my friend. And of course, I mean, I'm not. I don't have that YouTube platform. Maybe in 5 years.
He was on 2 podcasts in I don't know how many years. And I'm not sure.
Oh, wait a second. Okay. Yeah. Somebody just tried to open that door. Wait a second. Oh, whatever. Yeah, what did you say?
Oh yeah, he was only on 2 podcasts so far.
Yeah. Rogan and
Tim Ferriss and Rogan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not there yet. So
no, it's just
give me some time. Yeah. But I get it, man. Who cares? I mean, we have his material. That's why I talk to guys like you. I talk to Brad Jones. I talk to everybody because my only thing is I want to get closer to the truth. And as soon as I hear bits and pieces of it, I'm asking questions. Not in a mean sense or not in a sense with ulterior motives. But see, I just love the scientific approach. You say something, let's ask some questions, have a discussion, and then we'll end up, hey, this seems to be the truth or whatever have you.
I mean, I was looking for one specific passage, but I cannot find it in the book right now.
Does he reference, are studies referenced in the book?
At the very end, yep. A lot of them, actually. Verkhoshansky.
Verkho is a legend.
Yeah.
What kind of links are there?
Well, no links.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's printed.
Yeah. But okay.
I don't have the links.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I want to talk to Dr. Kenneth Che as well, because I think that there might be stuff that we don't have a hold of yet, but I get his point as well, where he says, yes, there might be some studies from back in the day, but compared to the qualities of studies that we have today, they probably won't stand up to it. I get where he comes from.
You don't know. You would have to see the whole lineup.
Yeah. Most definitely. But hey, let's end it on this, man. It's almost 3 hours. I wanted to do some stuff as well, but I think I'm done for today. Oh my God, man. This was such an awesome conversation. Man, I really appreciate you showing up. It was... Man.
Thank you again for the invitation. It's been quite a pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode, you're over 40, and you're looking for a free kettlebell workout to help you get started, check the first link in the description. It works on YouTube as well as on Spotify.